I didn't think it was possible to be an even bigger fan of this guy. Listen in as one of the smartest minds in comedy heads into one of the world's most dangerous war zones to help out a friend. That's next on Brio TV, the podcast. Hi, everybody. Bill Brio here, and welcome to the 200th episode of Brio TV, the podcast. I've shared some wonderful exchanges over the past 5 years, candid conversations with the people who make the TV we love. My guest today is right at the top of that list. He's made viewers laugh since the 70s, first on stage in that magical Toronto production of Godspell, which is currently the subject of an upcoming documentary by Judd Apatow. Next, he was on stage with John Candy, Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Joe Flaherty, Andrea Martin, and others as part of the Toronto Second City troupe before breaking ground and winning Emmys with SCTV. During that run, he and Rick Moranis broke out as Bob and Doug McKenzie. Later, he took off with feature film and other series gems and clocked 5 seasons in support on Grace Under Fire. He later leaned big time into animation, reinventing himself as an hour-long procedural writer, and killed it on shows such as Arrested Development. I'm talking, of course, about Dave Thomas, who's come a long way from St. Catharines, Ontario. He's just back from traveling a great deal farther in distance and as a humanitarian, flying to war-torn Ukraine to help a friend in a life-and-death cause on the other side of the world. He's here to tell us all about it now. Please welcome Dave Thomas. Thank you very much for doing this. You gave me the heads up, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago now that you were planning this extraordinary trip to Ukraine. And my God, you hats off to you. Sounds like a tremendous achievement for you personally and inspiring for the rest of us. So I'm very, very happy to talk to you about this, and happy to see you back and ensconced in your usual surroundings. How are you, first of all?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
The organization that I went to the Ukraine for is a charitable organization that is seeking donor help to use, and this isn't a charity where there's a board of directors that takes a couple of million off the top. This is a charity where the dollars go right to the services provided for the Ukrainians. And it's called the UFF.org, the Ukrainian Freedom Fund. It's run by a friend of mine called Andy Bain. I was his partner in an animation company years ago. He had he bought some businesses in Ukraine when the Soviet Union collapsed. He was a very ambitious Yale business student that decided to take advantage of the collapse of the Iron Curtain and make some investments. One of them was an animation studio, so our plan was to outsource to this animation studio, which we did for over a decade, and then the war started, and then Andy stayed. We stopped doing the animation, and I kept in touch with him when he stayed in Ukraine. And then about a month, 2 months, a month and a half ago, he said, You have a profile in Canada. There are 1 million Ukrainians in Canada. We could use your support. And if you could help us build our donor base by coming to Ukraine and talking to people and giving us your assessment of the situation. This was not a political trip on my part. I'm a comedian. I'm not a politician. I don't know anything I know something about politics, but layman stuff, the stuff that everybody knows. So I went for humanitarian reasons because there were a lot of people being killed, a lot of people being displaced, a lot of people being captured and tortured, and so the services that they provide training for Ukrainians to do on-site medical triage for troops and civilians that are in war zones. They provide technical expertise to help their Ukrainian soldiers defuse unexploded ordnance that might be modern and complicated, because there's a lot of modern warfare going on right now. And clothing, medical supplies, food. They actually have a team of soldiers who goes into Russian-occupied areas and rescues Ukrainians that are trapped there, usually elderly and women and children. And I went on one of those sorties with them, and it was pretty hair-raising. So they provide all kinds of services, mostly humanitarian, but they also have American advisors and Canadian advisors. There's a Canadian general to a rear admiral from the United States Navy, a 2-star Air Force general. I interviewed those guys and talked to them and asked them some questions like, why are you here? And things like that. And the answers that I got were pretty compelling. And
did they ask you the same question?
Well, sure. Mm-hmm. But, their reason for being there is they felt that their country dropped the ball. And they're retired military. And they said there's a lot of guys retired like us and enlisted behind us who feel that it is the job of the big guy on the block, namely the United States, to ensure the peace in Europe, to make sure that another Hitler doesn't rise. That was the contract they had really when they formed NATO. And the contract, well, it was the concept behind the United Nations. It was all the post-war stuff that was sort of set up in Europe with the United States backing it. And now they're dropping the ball, and now they're out, and they're turning it into a business negotiation. And so skirting the politics of this, these guys are military guys. And I got an opportunity to interview them. And to me, they were like, William Holden and Ernest Borgnine in the Wild Bunch.
Wow.
They're guys that look at their buddies or people down the street that are in trouble, and they just look at each other and say, that's not right. Come on, we got to do something about it. Wow. So they do. And so I was flattered and honored to have an opportunity to do something to help these people in my own way. And I'm trying to put together a documentary that will talk about this. I talked to soldiers. I talked to people who had been displaced. I talked to people who had lost loved ones. I talked to a woman whose husband was shot by snipers in front of her while he was packing the car to escape. I talked to stand-up comedians to find out if there's anything funny in the Ukraine, anything that people are laughing at. I talked to, students. I talked to amputees, war victims. There's a very specific new kind of war going on with drones where they're targeting people specifically with drones who provide critical services to the Ukrainian forces. There was a communications officer who I talked to in a bar who'd lost both his legs when they blew up his car, his personal car that he was driving when he was off duty, because they're tracking him. Everything is like tracked. everything is cyber warfare, Bluetooth, social media tracking and everything. And I was talking to this guy, and he said to me, "They know you're here." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Dave, we know you're here. They know you're here."
Well, I hope they got over 3CP1, at least back on the SCTV days. David, let me back you up a little bit. When your friend Andy said to you, "Hey, listen, what do you think about coming over here?" And that had to have been a hard decision. I mean, you must have family and friends who said, "Have you been reading about this?" And it looks pretty grim. How did it take a while to come to that moment where you said yes, or what was that process like?
Well, I mean, I talked to my kids about it, and they were worried. And I said, "Don't worry, I'll be protected." And there's soldiers over there, and there's Andy's, my ex-partner's a retired Marine colonel, and he's not going to let anything happen to me. I'll be fine. So when I got there, the first night in my hotel, I heard explosions, and that shook the hotel, and that was a new experience for me.
Were you in Kyiv?
In Kyiv.
Kyiv.
I had to fly from LA to Istanbul, and then I got a connecting flight on Turkish Airlines from Istanbul to a little place in Moldova called Chisinau. And then because Ukraine is a no-fly zone, I had to go for an 8-hour drive by car from Chisinau to Kyiv. And man, I never showed my passport more times than that. There were checkpoints all the way. There was like wrecked vehicles on the highway that we had to kind of drive around, and it was pretty hairy, even on the way in. And
what were you in a bus? Were you in an armored vehicle? Were you with soldiers?
I was in a SUV, a Mercedes SUV that Andy arranged for me that had some electronic countermeasure stuff for drones, and a bald, hulky driver who didn't speak any English. I had to use Google Translate when I needed to take a leak and get him to stop and take, go to the bathroom, So it was an experience.
When you would show your passport, I mean, was that something that they said, sit here for an hour, or were they able to wave you through fairly fast? That would seem like a nerve-wracking experience.
At the border was the longest wait between Moldova and Ukraine. And but I did some media prior to leaving. I did TVO with Steve Paikin. I did
CP.
What?
You did the Canadian Press?
Yeah, I did CP. I did Toronto Star.
Yeah.
They knew I was coming. It was really hilarious how everything is on social media these days, and everybody knows everything. So it got easier as I went through, and they'd look at the guy, Dave Thomas, go.
Wow.
So,
Dave, they knew you were coming, but you just said that you actually went into Russia helping folks who were trying to rescue elderly.
Russian occupied areas of Ukraine.
Oh, the Occupy, I see. Okay, thank you. Okay. But that had to have been, something they didn't know.
Well, there were explosions around the vehicles. I was in a white van. There's pictures that I can send you for this podcast.
Wow.
The soldiers that drove me in the van gave me a flag, their flag. They're a specific unit and they have a name for themselves, which I already divulged in one place, but the Ukrainian people emailed me and they said, don't say the name of the unit.
Right.
These people have to be,
Yep.
their identities have to be protected because the Russians will attack them with drones. So, anyway, I went in with them, and we got some women and children, a couple of dogs out, and in the van that I was in, and it was. That's the first time I ever saw explosions that weren't on a set, that were in the controlled environment of a movie set. And I told them that I would probably die of natural causes, like a heart attack, rather than a bomb or a drone. And so they said, if that happens, they said, we'll put a flak jacket on you and a helmet and throw you in a ditch, and you can die a Canadian hero in Ukraine.
Wow. Is that flattering or horrifying?
It became a joke that they would say, Mr. Thomas, your flag jacket and helmet is in the back for you.
So they spoke a bit of English.
There was always somebody there. There was a guy assigned to me by Andy to make sure that I didn't get killed or hurt.
That's awfully sporting of him.
I walk with a cane. I'm a gimp, so I needed help. Anyway, so there was always a translator, but I picked up a few phrases. There is a strange phenomenon that I observed that is part of the culture, and it's called Vyseby de Dobre. Dobre is good, but it means everything's going to be all right. I'm pronouncing it sloppily, but the city looks like a normal city. When I arrived in Kyiv, other than night when there was bombing, it looked like a normal city. It looked like, students were going to school, shop owners had their wares out, for sale, and, traffic jams on their main street. And then I thought, well, what's going on? It doesn't look like there's a war going on here. This looks like a typical European city. Then I heard the explosions at night. And then this probably the thing that crystallized this for me was I heard that there was an attack on a shopping mall. 3 drones attacked it, blew up one side of it. It's a massive mall, and as big as any American or Canadian mall I've ever seen. But I got there the next day with my video crew to see the devastation. And a lot of the store owners had already put up glass to replace the broken glass.
Wow.
Cardboard up. And this was like, the attack was at about 1 a.m, and I was there at 10. So stuff was already repaired. I got mad at myself because I was a little disappointed that I didn't have any devastation to videotape, because it looked like things were already under repair. And what I learned was that this is what they're doing. There's a kind of a resilience, a quiet resistance that these people have since they've been in this decade-long war, that they have to live life as much as they can close to normal, because to live it any other way is a dead end for them. So
incredible.
To them, the motto, everything is going to be all right. And there's a song that they all know that I got the rights to for this documentary I'm trying to do. I don't know. Well, it was really weird, Bill, because
like you said, Dave, I just wanted to ask, you're there, then you want to do a documentary, which sounds like an incredible idea. You say you had a crew. Was there a sound person and a camera person, or
Yeah.
okay,
and they were provided by the Ukrainian Freedom Fund.
Wow.
So they're just people helping out. I asked them what they're getting paid, and they laughed. They were getting paid anything. They were doing it on their own, and they were with me the whole time I was there.
So they're sort of like a Canadian crew then.
Yeah, and I was there shooting. I got the joke. I was there shooting. They would pick me up at 9 a.m. at the hotel, and I wouldn't get back until dinner time.
Dave Thomas will be right back after this short break. Did you know that Superman comes from Canada? Well, he was co-created by a Canadian, Joe Shuster. That building he leapt over in a single bound, modeled after the old Toronto Star headquarters, plus that frigid Fortress of Solitude, had to be up in the Northwest Territories, right? Well, here's something else that's absolutely 100% Canadian, Super Channel. That's where you'll find both When Calls the Heart and another period romance, When Hope Calls, both shot in Canada. Super Channel Heart and Home is also where you can watch the new Canadian original, The Movie Star and the Cowboy. Mackenzie Porter stars as an actress who has to saddle up and prove she can play a rancher. All that and so much more, including top imports from around the world, streaming now on 4 different platforms on Super Channel, available via most cable providers across the country. Back again with Dave Thomas. The reports we read here and you read in California, obviously, is that all this attempt to try to bring a ceasefire is being met with terrible attacks from Russia, that Putin is, I guess, determined to claim as much of Ukraine as he can, and it's just bombs away. So this is happening while you are there, from what I could read here. Did the people you
actually
was it?
Yeah, they had like 760 drone attacks in one night. It was ridiculous. Here's the problem. The ballistic missiles that they've been firing, the rocket attacks, they call them, the Ukrainians have countermeasures for those. But the drones are different. They got to shoot those down by hand. So that means there's not enough, when there's 700 drones coming at you, there's not enough manpower to take them all out. So some of them hit their targets. This mall that I went to, where the side of the mall was blown out, but they had already started repairing the damage inside the mall. But the parking lot, the explosion went out towards the parking lot on the ground behind the mall and literally melted all the cars. The cars were being towed away while I was there. And I got footage and a shot, some stills, of a little Ukrainian boy playing in the ashes of one of the drones.
Wow.
That's like, I don't know what kind of photo that is, but that's like one of those wartime photos that you think, this tells a story right in itself,
Yeah, no kidding.
So I'm not a war correspondent. I'm not a journalist. I'm not any of the things that I threw myself into for this documentary. And it was overwhelming because I don't have the experience or the training to be able to deal with it,
So how did you keep your head? I mean, you're a filmmaker. You're, someone who has made a lot of television. You could rely on those muscles, I guess, but it had to have been overwhelming.
I think I took my lead from those people. I thought, well, they're not falling apart, and they got way more at stake here than I do. So
wow,
I just got to buckle down and do this. So
you mentioned you went to a comedy club.
yeah, and I talked to stand-ups because I wanted to know, what are they laughing at?
Yeah.
Are they laughing? And they said, "Oh yeah, laughter is very important to us."
What are the? It can't be like tickles or yuck yucks. Is it like the comedy bunker or what? What are they?
The comedy club. Hold on, what's it called? Let me pull up my photo here. It's ridiculously. It's called the Comedy Room, and then there's Dosk or something like that. I'll send you pictures of that. But
do they have a picture of Jay Leno up on the wall, or
no? It's
one of his tours?
It's a stand-up with the mic and the comedy club logo behind him, and then shots of the audience laughing and things like that.
What could you tell? Obviously, it's all not in it's not in English. Were they making jokes about Putin and Russia, or could you tell what was happening?
The next day, at the Ukrainian Freedom Fund offices, I interviewed two of the comics.
Oh, wow!
Spoke English.
Great.
So I was able to get a kind of summary from them of what people are laughing at and why. And they're laughing at ordinary things. They're not laughing at Putin jokes or Trump jokes or Zelensky jokes. They're laughing at toilet jokes, dating jokes, the stuff that is the stuff of life.
Wow.
That, because they don't want to acknowledge, I guess, the horrible war going on. So go figure, right? I mean,
we hear of this resolve among Ukrainian people. We see it in Canada, and it does it just seem very unique in terms of other countries that people can endure and go on in the middle of war like that for decades.
Well, I don't know. You mean, is it unique to those people that if it happened in Canada or United States that we wouldn't be able to deal with it? I don't know. Maybe we would be able to deal with it. Yeah. I don't know how people adjust to things like that. All I know is that I went in really for a short visit to a struggle that's been going on for over a decade. And so I've barely scratched the surface, of what's going on with my stupid little video package, walking around trying to talk to people.
Oh, good for you. How long were you there, Dave?
10 days.
That's quite a while. Would you go?
Considering the trip, which is, is a 12 or 14-hour flight to Istanbul, and then a 5-hour layover, and then another flight to Chisinau. The amazing thing about Istanbul is it's probably one of the biggest airports I've ever been in my life.
Huh.
And totally modern. And if you have a layover of more than 4 hours, they have rooms that you can crash in with little beds that are
the airport,
private, and they're very clean and well maintained and very modern. Even when I was on the road trip from Chisinau to Kyiv, going through all the various stops, and I had to stop for the bathroom twice on the 8-hour drive. So we stopped at gas station bathrooms. Well, I didn't know what to expect in a war zone. They're the cleanest bathrooms I've ever seen in my life.
Oh my God. I'm not kidding. Really?
I was shocked at how clean they were. And pleased, I got to tell you, because, you walk into sort of a Ukrainian 7-Eleven gas station bathroom and you think, well, what the hell am I going to find in here? It was the cleanest bathroom I've ever seen.
Wow. That's What else surprised you the most from everything that you saw there? I mean, you mentioned these beautiful airports and everything else, but was there something you just did not expect that you saw?
Well, I guess I didn't expect the. Okay, there's a couple of things I didn't expect. I didn't expect the American military to be there. Retired American military. That was something that. Sorry about the gardeners if you hear that noise. They always, whenever I have a podcast, the gardeners with their leaf blowers are right outside that window. So, anyway, so the American soldiers surprised me the most, and these are guys. That Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery that I talked to, he was on the staff of the executive committees of presidents from Bush on forward. And
Wow.
He's a very smart guy, and he understands what's going on in the world in a way that I don't. So I considered myself very much a novice and a student, and listened to what they had to say. And they were more certain of what Putin's objectives are than I was, from what I read in the media. Because, the media these days is all sort of like self-interest media. It's like you read this story on the right, you read this story on the left.
Right.
They're diametrically opposed to each other. You don't know what to believe, and then there's all the rubble in the middle. So, but to sit down with some real people and to talk to them and listen to them who, from their years of experience, what their assessment of the situation is I consider that educational and mind opening for me anyway, because it's hard to know when you look at the news these days what to believe.
Well, it must be fascinating to get their perspective. I mean, just as someone who watches TV and reads newspapers, it seems Putin is determined to grab as much of Ukraine as he can, and the resources, whatever is left that hasn't been bombed to smithereens. I mean, it was certainly.
Well, it's not going to end there. I mean, he's kidnapping children of military age and putting them in indoctrination camps to turn them into soldiers, and he wants to use the Ukrainian forces to move into other countries in the NATO world. Poland and Finland in particular are vulnerable. And so, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the politics of it because I'm not, as I said, a political science major, and I don't have the background to be able to make any pronouncements. My story is more of a humanitarian story.
Yep.
That these are people that are, some of them are amputees, some of them have lost loved ones, some of them are displaced, some of them have children whose school has been bombed or destroyed, and they are still trying to live their lives. And I talked to them to find out how they were doing that.
Yeah, amazing, David. Do you have any information about your documentary? Is this something you'd like to see completed this year, or any timetable?
We have a meeting. I'm working with Andrew Barnsley at Project 10 on this. We have a meeting at CBC to talk to them about it, and we'll see what they say. But I don't know. I mean, I already have some footage shot. I know I'm going to have to shoot more, which may mean another trip to Ukraine. And it will certainly involve talking to Canadian Ukrainians that have loved ones over there that they worry about.
Yeah.
And so, I have some stuff already shot, and I will be shooting other things to complete the story. If I can get support for it, I have to get that first,
Well, partnering with Andrew Barnsley is a great step. He was just a guest with me about a month ago, and
I love Andrew. He's a great guy.
He gets things done. He wins Emmys and in the process. So smart partnership there. Well, that'd be exciting. I'd love to see this film. Boy, a lot of people would, just because of your perspective of someone who isn't a soldier or a politician. Like you would have the pulse of the people from meeting them, and you've always been a very curious. You've been curious about everything, right, David? You and I could talk about Star Trek for an hour and a half. So it must have been tremendous opportunity, and it would make a great doc. So congrats again.
I've done every type of television. I've done animation. I created a game show when I was bored on Grace Under Fire and produced 144 episodes of a game show called Family Challenge. I've done sitcoms. I've done movies of the week. I've done everything really except news. And now this is my first step into kind of a documentary. And it's because I'm curious. I want to know, I formed the animation company with Andy and another guy from The Simpsons back years ago, just because I'd never done animation. And I thought, all right, well, I wonder where this will go. And so look where it went. It ended up moving out of the world of animation into real life and into documentary and into a war zone.
Yeah, so it's incredible. Was this the company with Andy? Was that the company that did the Bob and Doug animated series? Yeah. And you guys, you've done tons of animation voices for all kinds of popular shows, right? Kids shows and everything else.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, it's just, I did drama. When a comedy changed and became woke, and I couldn't find a spot for myself in it anymore, I moved over to Bones, and I was a writer and consulting producer on that show for 3 years, and then I moved to The Blacklist, and so, and I did it because I wanted to write, in a sitcom writing. Well, sketch writing is the most compact, and then sitcom writing is 22 minutes. Which they call it sitcom because all you can really do in 22 minutes is react to a situation. Oh, my mother-in-law is coming. What are we going to do? She hates me, and so the show is reacting to that situation. The extra 20 minutes or so that you have for a 1 hour drama allows you to break out a story in 5 acts. And it was a really interesting writing exercise for me that I enjoyed. And brought me back to where I started out. When I first came to LA, I was writing screenplays, not even SCTV or sketches, And so it was a move back to longer form writing, which I loved.
Yeah.
So
you and Dan Aykroyd wrote Spies Like Us. Yeah. But even before, we've talked many times, of course, and when you really first started, you perfected the 30 and 60 second screenplay in commercial advertising, right? So you've really run the gamut in storytelling.
It's amazing how much information you can tell in 30 seconds. And when I first started on SCTV, one of the things that people who write sketches commonly do that is a mistake, a novice mistake, is they make them too long. And, make your point, do your joke, and get the hell out of there as fast as you can. And then there were showrunners and producers who started in the sort of popular world of sketch comedy that rose in the 80s, saying that, well, a sketch must have a beginning, middle, and an end. And I remember being in a writer's room, and when somebody would come up with a funny idea, I'd go, well, that's good. And typically what the showrunner would do is they would say, well, go write that up. And what they meant was take that essential funny idea that you just had and build this infrastructure of beginning, middle, and end around it. Sometimes a labyrinth of unfunny structure that basically when people watch it, they'll go, oh, yeah, there was one funny thing in the middle, but it went on too long and the ending was really lame. Monty Python were the first comedy group who would send the sketch police in to end a sketch. All right, enough time on this. Time to move on. We've made your point. Go on, off with it. And I loved that because it was so economical and it meant that you could do just the essential joke that was funny and not try to justify it in some kind of a form or a structure. So there was a lot of nonsense going on, I think, in writing rooms that contributed to comedy sketches being too long. And then there were situations like on Saturday Night Live where it's shot in this studio at Rock Center called 8H.
Yep.
And when I worked on the new show with Lorne Michaels, I got kind of an inside view of, because he modeled that on his work on SNL. Mm-hmm. There's a finite number of sets that can be loaded into Studio 8H, which means that in the 90 minutes, there's only so many places you can go. So there's going to be lights up on a living room set. You know that you're going to be in that living room set till the commercial break. And that kind of predictability is the enemy of comedy. You want your comedy to be unpredictable. You want people not to be sure of where you're going, to go in one direction and then yank them around in another direction and keep them off balance, you know? So there were a lot of mechanical things and structural things being fed into the writing rooms that I looked at that I thought, well, this is nonsense. And then I thought, if we're going to start to get long-winded, maybe I should move to drama. So I did.
Well, I think you're right about Monty Python. I think the phrase, and now for something completely different, is the greatest comedy device in the last 50 years, right? It just chops it off and away you go. We'll have more with Dave Thomas in just a moment.
Here on the Mountain of Entertainment, we take crime off the streets and bring it right into your living room. We're throwing the book at boredom with every episode of Matlock, Watson, Elsbeth, and the biggest crime lineup you've ever seen. You have the right to remain entertained.
Stream Paramount Plus from $6.99 a month.
I'm gonna need backup here.
Paramount Plus.
Time once again to check in with Emily Gagne and find out what's new this month on Hollywood Suite. Emily, what do you got?
Are you ready to rumble, Bill?
Yes, I am, Emily.
Well, that's a great thing because we have this collection this month called Fights, Camera, Action. It's iconic action films from throughout history, everything from Bruce Lee to Charlie's Angels to Kill Bill and The Matrix. We've got it this month.
Wow, lots of action, but I bet you got some more stuff to tell us.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we always have great Canadian content, you know, stuff like Strange Brew and comedies like Bandits. We've got everything you can imagine that's Canadian. And we're also a Canadian company. So if you're looking to, you know, support Canadian, support Hollywood Suite. Don't let the name fool you.
There it is. All right. Tariff-free all month. Great films on Hollywood Suite. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
In my eyes, there's a perfect world. I can see it, a perfect world.
And we're back. And I'm with you. You know, I love comedy. I try to find it now on television, and it's requires a deep search. And often I find myself on YouTube You know what? The comedy series I've watched lately and loved, He and She, Richard Benjamin and Paula Prentice from 1967.
Oh,
If you're not familiar with it, check it out. It's
Joe. Yeah, I can't say I watched it back in the day, but
it's one of those one season wonders no one really knows about. But it's like a lot of folks that worked on Mary Tyler Moore were in the writing room, and it just seemed like they converged and they hit the sweet spot in terms of the sitcom, the 22-minute thing. And they did it in a way that wasn't as obvious as Your Mother-in-Law Is Coming, and they just had the right cast and people and talent to do it. So, but sometimes you have to go back a ways to find a funny show these days, and that's frustrating, right?
Well, I mean, I think it's good that you can you go back to old shows and see them,
Sure. Nothing wrong with Laurel and Hardy.
No, nothing wrong with any of that.
For example. Dave, I wanted to ask you, just speaking of documentaries, about the documentary that Judd Apatow is doing, I believe, on the great play Godspell that was such a turning point for you and so many others. Is that something that you're part of? Are you contributing to?
Well, they interviewed me, but I'm really kind of peripherally part of it. I was in a replacement cast. I was not in the original cast. And so it ran at the Royal Alec and then moved to the Bayview Theater. And partway into the Bayview Theater, a couple of people left, and I was still working on a master's degree, and very envious of my friends Eugene Levy and Marty Short, who got into that show, and they offered me a part in it. So I left while I was working on my master's degree in English Lit, and basically abandoned that and had to find a funny way actually, of cobbling it together at the end so that I didn't embarrass myself. But I was in it, in this second cast, which has now become known as the extended cast. And so I wasn't part of the core, you know what I mean?
No, but I think we've talked about this. Eugene Levy was your Jesus, right? In the production.
That's right.
Yeah. I mean, so there was still people involved that were there, right?
Oh, yeah. And I knew all those guys. I mean, Eugene and Marty went to McMaster with me, and we did plays together there. And then after that, I got a scholarship to continue on and do a master's degree in English Lit. And because they were paying me to teach first-year tutorials, I didn't get money offered anywhere else. So I took that gig, and then Marty and Eugene got cast in Godspell, and I was like, God damn it, I wish I was in that show. You know? But then later on, I was in the show, so it was kind of cool.
Have you been watching the great Catherine O'Hara on the Studio, the Apple TV series?
The Studio?
Yeah, am I saying it right? As if I got goodness.
The Last of Us, I think she's in.
Yes.
But I haven't seen The Studio. Is she in another show already? It's hard to keep.
Well, she has in a couple of episodes. This is the Seth Rogen series.
Oh, that. Oh, I started watching that and got kind of bored and turned it off. But but I didn't see her episode, or I would have stayed. Her
episode was the less boring one. Yeah.
I'll go back and find her episode and watch it. You know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so you say you would go back and to continue work on the documentary. So having gone once, you have no fear of returning?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can always get killed, I guess, but you know, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think that there's better use of bullets than a 77-year-old comedian. So, you know, I think I'll be okay.
Well, What can I say? I'm inspired by it all, and a lot of us are. So thank you, David, for this venture. And tell us again how listeners can contribute to the fund. The uff.org is the website. What's the best way to get involved, to send money, or do any other ways you can help?
Just go to theuff.org and follow the prompts. It's a website, and you'll see what they're doing. You'll see how they spend their money, and you'll see where you can support at that point. It's tax deductible, so you'll get credit for that donation. And anything that you can give is going to help this organization help Ukrainians in this struggle that is just monumental. It's the biggest war since World War II in Europe, and it's funny how when a war goes on for a long time, it becomes page 6 after a few days. Do you know what I mean? And people go on to the next wardrobe mishap of some supermodel, and it's not. It's funny how things go from being news to not news. We live in a different world. I was talking to Rick Moranis about this morning. I look around at the world that I'm in. I'm definitely in the Gran Torino phase of my life.
You're referencing the movie, I'm
an old guy sitting on his porch yelling at kids to get off his lawn. I find it a challenge to stay on top of things.
Did you and Rick ever do any kind of performances for troops or anything in Canada? Did you ever?
Never did.
No.
Not that we wouldn't, but we never did. No, I mean, we did so much stuff together, and we still talk all the time.
That's great.
And, he's like, I was like married to him for like 20 years, 30 years. And so you become, I rode around and promoting the McKenzie brothers, and I was in the back of limos and airplanes with Rick to so many places, just talking about everything for years. You really get to know somebody when you spend that much time with them, and I love the guy. It's pretty.
Well, yeah, you were in the eye of the storm. That was a phenomena. The Bob and Doug days, and the movie, and the album, and everything else. And this is going to sound like a stupid segue, but you're known, of course, for your Bob Hope impersonation. No one else does them like you do them. Did you think about Bob Hope at all in terms of, there's a guy that, he was famous for entertaining troops in World War II, USO shows, and Vietnam. I'm sure his motivations were very different, but did you think at all about Bob Hope and war while you were in Ukraine?
No. Other people thought of it for me, and I went, oh, yeah. But the reality of it is, Bob Hope has been dead for almost 20 years now. Yeah. And people don't know who he is. And that's a real kind of a reminder of the short shelf life we all have in entertainment. And if somebody who was as big as Bob Hope can be completely forgotten, and here's a story, Paul Schaefer has told this story a few times, but he told me this, that Britney Spears used to come on to Letterman when Paul was doing the Letterman show. And she would just show up unannounced, and they would bump a guest to let her come on because she brought such ratings to the show, right, that it was absolutely to their benefit to do that. And she came on one show, and Paul played her on with "Thanks for the Memories." And after the show, Britney came up to him and said, "What was that song you were playing?" And Paul said, "Well, whenever you come on the show, we'll bump a guest for you because you're such a big star." And back in the day, whenever Bob Hope dropped by the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, Johnny would bump a guest for Bob Hope. And Brittany looked at me and she said, who's Bob Hope?
Oh, ouch. Yeah.
And Paul told me that story, and I burst out laughing. And then here's the second part of it that I think is even funnier. And that was a friend of Paul's was in the elevator going down with Brittany and her entourage. And somebody in Brittany's entourage said to Brittany, "Who's that little bald guy you were talking to?" And Brittany says, "Oh, I don't know. I think that's Dave's DJ."
Oh, ouch.
So Paul embraced that. I love Paul because he finds the humor in everything. He embraced that because he thought he's not a band leader anymore in the minds of the audiences that are out there. He's a DJ.
Oh, well, it's a wonder she didn't say who's Johnny Carson.
Well, I'm sure she didn't know who he was either, So
I think,
but that's the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
That I told Marty Short one time when he was debating about whether or not to do a project. I said, "What does it matter? Do it, don't do it." I said, "In the year 2300, all of show business will be remembered in one paragraph with a picture of John Wayne." So but what we do doesn't matter. I had no idea when I told that joke that it was actually going to happen during my lifetime.
Right.
And I was going to become the brunt of my own joke. But it does happen,
Well, let's all try and hold on to the Duke at least. Did you read Semi's book about Carson, by the way?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
I mean, I didn't really know him that well. I had lunch with him a couple of times. That was arranged to his writers, one of them, Bob Smith, and the other two guys, Andrew Nichols and Daryl Vickers. I will say that there's a story that Johnny didn't care for Bob Hope, and that's not true.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I've heard that story, and that was my assumption.
That's a bullshit story that I think it's got traction on the internet, sites like Quora, places like that, where people mouth off and give their opinions that are unfounded. Johnny respected Bob as the pioneer of the monologue, which he himself benefited from, and and also that he was in his prime a really funny comedian with an ability to ad-lib without his writers, and Johnny knew that history. What happened with Bob was he stayed at the party too long, and
right,
he was at still walking on plugging shows when he was really deficited, when he couldn't hear properly and he couldn't see properly. And so, that made him a difficult guest to interview. And it was only the difficulty of interviewing him that Johnny objected to, not the man himself.
Yeah, because Hope was also hard of hearing toward those times too, right? So
he was stone deaf, not just hard of hearing. He was very deaf. I did a benefit for him.
Wow.
When he was at the Beverly Hilton Hotel. I was on the dais with a bunch of comedians. I had no reason to be there except that for my Bob Hope impersonation. And during the whole thing, he was sitting in the audience. He kept going, "What's that? What's that? Who's that? What was that? I didn't hear that." Interrupting the show, asking Norm Crosby and Sid Caesar and people like that who were on the dais to repeat their jokes so he could hear them. And he was old and frail then. And I remember there was a Entertainment Tonight crew there shooting that. And they walked us all over to this riser. And I was walking with Hope, and there were apple boxes set up that we were supposed to walk up on to get up on the riser. And he was pretty frail at this time. And he said to me, he said, wait, where's Dolores? She normally helps me with things like this.
Wow.
And I said, I said, don't worry, Bob, I got you. And I took him by the arm and helped him up on the thing. This is a guy who can be seen on YouTube on top of a table doing a dance-off with Jimmy Cagney.
Right. Yeah.
Where he was an amazing dancer, so light on his feet, so agile. And I was thinking, God, this is so sad that I'm taking this guy's arm and helping him up. And when you stay at the party too long, people get to feel sorry for you. And that's not a good end, you know?
Well, at least we can go back and look at him in the 30s. I mean, no one was faster with dialogue. I think Woody Allen was a huge fan of Bob Hope, you know, and people that know. Yeah.
Borrowed from him. Woody's coward character was a lift.
Yeah. That's true. Well, I always loved your Bob Hope on Dave Foley's Christmas special when you walked off, followed by the cue card guy. It was very, very funny. Listen, David, thank you again for your time. You're always so generous. Congrats on this trip and everything that you accomplished, and great success with helping to raise funds and awareness across Canada for such a worthy cause. So thank you very, very much for talking about it today, and all the best to you, and keep me posted. I hope to hear about part 2 on this and your documentary. It'd be a great idea.
Thanks for the opportunity to plug it, and I hope people will contact theuff.org.
Okay, I will. Thank you very much. Take care, David. My thanks once again to Dave Thomas, and this is his 3rd episode as my guest on Brio TV, the podcast. 2 more, and I'll have to get him a 5-Timer Club jacket, maybe a Full Metal jacket. Hope to talk to him again when the documentary on his trip to Ukraine comes out. Stay tuned for updates on that. Also, if you wish to make a donation to help the brave people of Ukraine, and you're listening in Canada, find the online site at ukrfreedomfund.org. That's ukrfreedomfund, all one word, .org. You'll see that they've already raised $6,150,000 there. Click on Donate Now, and you can send funds via check, PayPal, wire transfers, and other ways. Follow the instructions at the site. Thanks as always to producer Phil Hong, musicians BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and Stephen Dudley, and you, listener, for joining in. If you like what you heard, please spread the word. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.